Hey, what's going on, guys? I've got the Traxxas TRX4 here. Sorry, just getting a couple of things set up. Wish I could see the preview better before you have to hit live, right? So, got the Traxxas TRX4 here with sans body at the moment. Here's your body. The Defender D110 body that this thing comes with. I've already got the body set aside, so I think we all know what a body is and how that goes together. I've already shot some video on the overview of this car, so at this point I'm not really, I'm not trying to go over everything as far as this goes. I'm actually just going to get into tearing down and getting into some of the individual parts of this so that I can look at those. And I figured while I was doing that and getting that ready for the next video, I could do some of the live stuff just to answer some questions while we're actually tearing it down. The overview and all of that other stuff we'll go through in the edited videos. So if that helps answer a little bit of your questions, that's what we'll have there. So I've got Facebook and YouTube going. As always, it's a little bit harder to get good views on the Facebook side than it is YouTube. YouTube, I'll switch over to the close-up view so you can actually see what makes this car go a little bit easier. Right now I've got it on the dual screen set. But that's what we got. Yes, the winch in the front of this thing is fake. It's hollow on the back. It's just molded. I'll try and keep up with the comments as best as I can on both. They're separated a little bit, so and of course we know that there's a delay on the YouTube or on the Facebook ones. So we're gonna get into this now. Start tearing it down. It's a late start. I would have liked to have started earlier. If you just popped in, you haven't missed anything. It just started a few minutes ago. So let's just start tearing into it. The tires and wheels on this thing, while the tires feel like an okay compound, I'm going to switch views here on. There we go. And then we'll make me smaller. How about that? So while the tires feel fairly decent on here, they actually don't. I don't like the looks of them. I think that's, if they missed the boat anywhere on this car, I think it's these tires and wheels. I don't think a spoked design like this belongs on a Defender, and the tires are just not that great. Traxxas knows licensed tires, so I don't know why they. I don't know. That's the one part of it that I feel like they fell a little bit short of. So we're going to get, Jesus. If I seem hyper, it's actually, while I didn't have a monster lately, I've been fighting computer issues tonight, and that has pissed me off more than anything. So at this point, I'm just glad to finally be into actually working on the car. I did an overview video before this. Of course, that'll all have to get edited and whatnot, but it gets us to this point. So I don't think that there's anything about the tires and wheels that you guys really need to know about a glue-on wheel. Molded hex in the back looks okay. That's about it. So we're going to set the tires and wheels aside for now, and then we can start to get a look at this thing. So let's. I'll give you guys just a little bit of a close-up look behind the tire and wheel first. Of course, the portal on the front that's built into the knuckle. That's the important part behind this. It's a 2-gear design. It's I think the first thing I'll do is I'm going to get the. Let's just pull the axles off this first. We'll see what it takes to get these axles off. The front lower links and shocks are all retained by the same screw. Let's see. You don't need to see me as much as these. So the shock is mounted in single shear, the link in double shear. Not bad. The shocks look good. I do like the shocks quite a lot. Those drive shafts look awfully familiar. We've all seen something very similar to those before. So with the single shear shock, being retained, and then the link being retained by that same screw, it actually is pretty simple to get that that removed. You can get them lined up separately but retained all at once. Kind of nice. Let's remove the link from the servo. Is there a nut on it? No. Again, sorry if I'm not keeping up with comments. Anything else on the market have portals? Yeah, this is, I think, this would be the third car on the market to have portals. MST came out with the CFXW with portals prior, and then a few years ago the G-Made R1 had portals. So, portals have been done. The CFXW is not a bad car. The G-Made R1 was not a good car. We can check the travel on the shocks. It might be a little bit shorter than like an SCX10. The overall length, I think, is very similar, but the travel may be shorter indeed. I don't know that yet, though. That's just kind of an assumption. Let's see. Sorry. Yeah, again, as far as the design of the body, that's going to be, like it or not, you can change it. I will say that I did weigh that body, and the body weighs 1.9 pounds. So this body with the spare tire, these scale accessories, all this molded in roof rack, the molded in fender flares, cross braces, that whole deal, the grill, all the light buckets, that whole thing, 1.9 pounds. It's not a light body. So let's see. The links on this car are not aluminum. They are steel with a new style rod end. It's not a Revo rod end. It's actually a new rod end we haven't used before. It's got a hex section molded into it. Hi, Mom. While you would prefer that, everybody else wants to see the truck. So at this point, I've removed all of the links and everything except the cable-operated locker up front. So let's see. Now that's just retained by a ball cup, so we should be able to pop that off fairly easily. So that's off, and then there is a M3 holding the cable in place. So not a whole lot of drama into removing that cable system. So we'll set this aside. So here's our new TRX axle, TRX4, whatever you want to call it. I'm just replacing screws in this so that I know where they went without having to look at the exploded diagram for everything. So give me just a second there. Okay, so let's try and give you guys a look at the same time. There we go. So let's see. The idea there. Those portals on the outside look pretty good. We've got 2 bolts on the front there, towards the top, and then on the back side we've got 6, 3 on each side like that. You can see there. Those are an M2.5 screw. So now, as far as the comment, put these under an SCX10, that's something you need to really look at some math on, because I've done just some preliminary numbers based on looking at the exploded views and doing some math of the gear ratio. Before I get into this, we can actually calculate that here in a minute. But the ring and pinion on this, I think, is around a 3.25 to 1 reduction. Now, an SCX-10-2 reduction is 3.75 to 1, and that's the total axle reduction in an SCX-10-2. Now, then you come to the outside here, and you've got like another 2 to 1 or better reduction. So total, you've got like 7.5 to 1 reduction in this axle. That's a huge difference from just having reduction here. I don't know that I've seen any axle, with the exception of like a low-C worm gear type axle, that has that kind of reduction. Now, a low-C worm gear, I think, is like 20 to 1, but you're talking about worm gears, that's a whole different ballpark. You know, worm gear, you can't backspin. You can't spin a worm gear axle from the stub axle and turn the pinion. So that, in effect, gives you a 100% drag brake all the time. So there's that. Now let's go a little bit further. We'll start by, let's tear apart one of these portals and see what's inside of that. Start with the non-drag link side. Why am I reviewing Traxxas? I don't even like or use Traxxas. Well, I like and use scale trucks, and I haven't liked or used Traxxas before because they haven't made a scale truck. I've never not liked them because of it. We use Traxxas parts on all kinds of things, so I'm actually excited to see this as far as an entry into our market. What's up, Matt? Okay, sorry. Let's see. I'm missing half the comments here. All right. Oh, wow. So, what fell out first are these two little pieces. Those are a spacer that's used in the kingpin hole of that axle. So that's what's used instead of a shoulder screw or a knuckle bushing. It's that spacer that sits in that area. So that's what we see first. Now, here's what we get. Here's our portal axle. Now, that's our little stub axle. This is a off-center pumpkin. So, you've got a shorter side and a longer side in the front. Now, the rear is centered, like a full-size axle with an off-centered front. Now, so that gives us this little setup. This just seems so tiny to me. I'm sure it's not. Of course I didn't bring my calipers in here yet, which my own fault, and I apologize for that. But it does seem small. I don't know yet. Once we start putting power to this, that's when we're going to start seeing how these things hold up. Now, it is always interesting. This is a portal axle design, so as you spin this, say clockwise, the output, the stub axle, spins counterclockwise because there's just a 2-gear design for the offset in there. And so let's keep going. Let's get into the next part of this. Where's my 1.5? Sorry. So on the back side of this knuckle, now we've got a very large bearing. Probably this is like I don't know. It's probably a 10 by 15 or so on the back. I don't have the exploded view next to me. I'm pretty sure they're probably 10 by 15 by 4. And there's 3 M2.5s that retain that bearing, which is an interesting design. So I've removed those 3 screws, and can I pull? Yep. So remove those 3 screws, and now our stub comes all out together. So the CVD type design of this axle, what would typically be the stub axle on your straight axle type truck, you would have your stub out here for your gear. This one actually has that top gear of the of the axle there. That is what is, builds up that drive cup. So that outer bearing comes off, that 10 by 15 by 4-ish sized bearing, and then the pin that makes up that CVD joint is underneath of there. So let's do some math. We've got, this is a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. A 9-tooth on that portion of it. Now, give me just a second. I did set up my spreadsheet to calculate my gearing. So I'm just going to input that as far as my top gear on the portal. Pinion, portal top. I said that's a 9-tooth, yes? Pretty sure. Okay. So, all right. So now, yeah, looks like way too many parts to break. Well, we'll see. Let's see exactly. Trying to just get through comments on here. Sorry. The Facebook comments go by so fast, I can only see them for a second before they go, and if I'm not paying attention, I'll miss them, and I apologize. This is not a machined gear, so I could see that this gear, although this is extremely wide, that's a really wide gear. That is wider than any of the other portal gears that I've seen so far. So I could see that being a big help in durability of this axle. Now let's get into the next part, just so you guys can see that's what's in there. All the way in through there is another bearing that this end rides on. So looks like our 2 mil. Again, there's 6 screws on the back of this. You guys are going to have to hash it out in the comments as you go, because I can't necessarily watch them all. Hopefully some of you guys can catch them. If there is a question that I keep missing, hope you guys can ask it again. Feel free. There is grease. I wouldn't say there's no grease, but at the same time, I wouldn't say that they used a healthy amount of grease. It is just some grease. Should you get a Bomber or Wraith? That's for a different video. I think we'll keep this one to TRX4 targeted questions as to keep things on track and moving in the right direction. Being that this is a new car, I do want to try and stay as on target as we can. Yes, for the Facebookers, the image video is reversed. It's just a Facebook thing. If I want to watch comments on that, I have to have it reversed. So, inside. Here's our second gear of the portal. Now, for me to remove that, I actually need to remove our hex. The hex is retained with like a horizon style design. Uses a set pin that goes through the stub. It's not just a set screw so that set pin goes through the hex and then into the stub axle itself to keep everything attached. We've seen that on a lot of other cars. However, this one looks mangled. I don't know. Maybe I'll take one of the other ones off and just see if that was typical. It definitely didn't look great, but in general, the hex design is slightly different than the ones that we've seen in the past. It's got a really large shoulder on the back side. I don't know if you can see that, but that step size is way bigger than a traditional hex has been. So it's kind of interesting. So now that I took off that hex, this whole thing can slide out. On the inside of that axle there, we've got 2 good-sized bearings. That lower bearing in particular, if you see that bottom bearing, that's a very large bearing. This is actually a 6 millimeter stub here. This portion here, that's 6 millimeters. That's large. Now, in the end, they still step down to a 4 millimeter thread. So your weak point may still be out here. However, you do have a very nice large area. You have a 6 millimeter hole where that hex goes through. So actually, that appears to be part of the design of that hex that's slightly different. That's definitely going to be beefy. That's a good design, especially if we go to like an upgraded, like a chromoly stub here. We'll definitely have a stout option. The gears, again, this is not a machined gear. This is like a sintered steel gear. So a machined gear set in the portal, I think, will be an important thing down the line. As far as when I talk about the importance of all of that, that's in my mindset where I'm using a Pro 4 on 3S, for wheel speed. And if you're using a brushed motor, sure, that'll probably be just fine for you. But I always try and think about how hard I could push this if I was driving like I absolutely, would want to all the time. Top speed, I really don't know. I very rarely care about like top speed. Let's see. Do I think is the TRX4 worth it? I don't know yet. Honestly, my initial thoughts are yeah, it does seem to be worth it. It is more expensive than the other options, so that is one big thing to note. It is a more expensive option. However, at this point, it's got good beef. It's got a lot of added things. So far we're seeing metal gears in places and all of that. So I think that's important to note. All of these things. Let's see. The other thing we have to note is how many goddamn screws there are. Again, I'm trying to just kind of put screws back in locations so that I don't lose them all. And I know where they went, and I can keep track. Oh, wait. So far, though, I will not be at K&K. K&K is basically the same time of my anniversary, and I think that my wife is requesting my presents for that. It's also on like the exact same day as her birthday. Magnetic mat, no thank you, not a fan. Did you work out the final gear ratio yet? I have not, but I will. However, my initial estimates on final gear ratio, which thank you for reminding me because I need to count this one quick. My initial thoughts are first gear, low gear, this is like a 60-to-1 gear ratio, final drive. And high gear, this is like a 30-to-1. Now, to give you, some, if you don't know how those numbers stack up, I personally usually shoot for between 40 and 50-to-1 for my final drive ratio. I think my SCX-10-2 is 47-to-1-ish. So this kind of sits on both sides of it. 30-to-1 would be too fast for me for my normal motor type setups, and I think that would also probably build heat if I was trying to crawl with it. Now 60-to-1 is really low, a lot of reduction, and normally would be too slow. I've always been I'm not an advocate of 2-speed transmissions. I don't like them personally. I'd rather have the simplicity of a single speed with a good censored brushless motor that gives me all the low speed control I need, as well as all the high speed I can usually, all the high speed I can usually handle in the car. So this car, you know, factory 2-speed, okay. You know, it's not my preference in cars. All right, let's see here. I need to count these gears real quick. Hold on, count it one more time. Okay, that's okay. It's a 23. I was trying to count half of it, and it just didn't seem like I wasn't expecting a 23. So the portal itself, I thought I had just the portal reduction on here. Yes, the portal reduction is 2.55 to 1. So that's what we've got for that. In general, I think these portals feel really good. Nice, you know, beefy stub. We'll see how everything holds together. You know, this top gear, if I was to guess, I would say that might be a weak point. The other thing, you know, I was talking about the size of this inner axle shaft. We also have to note that this also has 2.5 to 1 reduction in front of this axle shaft, which does help in you know, in keeping the stresses off of it. So that's a whole nother thing to think about. All right, now we need to get into the main part of the axle. I don't think we need to actually tear apart. Actually, I'm going to save myself some trouble and just put that upper shaft and stub back in for a moment. So, apologize for the delay as far as that goes. All right. So, now it's time to get into the main ring and pinion. We'll see how those look, and we'll get a good look at the cable operated diff locker that this thing has. What about the pitch of the portal gears? I think the pitch on these, I'd say that's a 32 pitch design. So it's a nice stout design, and I would also guess that we'll also probably have a little bit of noise. You know, maybe a little bit of a little bit more grease than they have would be a bonus. But we're going to set those parts aside, and yeah, those 3 screws that I put in on the backside, that's what retains that bearing in, which is what holds the stub axle and everything in. So now, the diff cover on this axle is retained with 4 screws on the back, very reminiscent of a Viterra Ascender and an Axial SCX-10-2. Yes, the noise in the background, we are running parts. Sorry about that. Vanquish going to make upgrade parts. We will see. Yeah, HPI has the Venture coming out soon as well. That'll be here very soon. You know, Traxxas has done a lot of marketing on the release of this truck. You know, they've rolled out these demos everywhere, the whole deal. We will see if they outdid Venom with this diff locker. I would say that almost everyone could have outdone the Venom Creeper. All right, so we pull off the diff cover, and then underneath we see 3 bearings. So that is due to the diff locking mechanism. You see those 3 bearings, and then you see the 3 bearing races molded into this side of of the bearing, of the diff cover. Sorry. So let's get a good look at that thing first. Now, can I activate the cable? Yep. So the cable end of this, I can hold on to the sheathing and activate the diff locker by moving that. So that's what I'm going to be doing to show. Let's show this camera first. Sorry. This is not an easy task. I will say that now, while this isn't spinning at the moment, this thing moves really well. I mean, as far as how easy it moves, but that all changes when you put things in a bind and things like that. Hey, finally, there's a bunch of grease in this one. So here's the grease that they didn't put in the portal itself. Now, here is the more interesting part, is how this has to come apart with that cable actuated diff locker. So I'm guessing we need to pull. This is the one problem with something only coming in a ready-to-run option, is you don't have the actual instructions. But so I just pulled this piece just straight out. It's got a couple of guides that it runs into, but then I just pulled it out and I can kind of to bring it out of the way. Does the cover look like it'll flex? It's a large cover. It's only retained by 4 screws. And again, the cover, you know, that's what retains the gears and everything. And you're relying on 4 screws that thread into plastic to hold that into place. So, you know, I don't know. It's hard to say how I feel about that. Now, the other thing I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to remove this knuckle and stub axle, or inner axle shaft, so that all that can pull out. One other thing I forgot to do is grab rags. Okay, let's use that. I don't want to lose these bushings. All right. So now we need to try and, should be able to, I can leave the pinion in, but try and pull this thing there. Oh, okay. All right. Here is our ring and pinion, or our ring gear assembly with the selectable locker. I'm going to try and get as close to this as possible to show you guys what's going on. Sorry. So, this section out here, this collar, that's what activates our locking differential. So, in the out position, like that, that's when you're going to see an open differential. And then as you bring it in, once this rotates into the correct place, it will then go into position, and that will lock your differential. So the ring gear is, the teeth are straight cut, so you're not looking at a high pinion gear or anything like that. But you know, that's our assembled look at this thing. So let's have our unassembled look at it. So pulled that outside bearing off. This collar then should just slide off. Yeah. So that collar slides off. This pin that sits behind it, that is always engaged with that collar. And then once I take this bearing off, see if you can see that. So you can see like the teeth Sorry, I'm trying to get this thing to focus. There's a, you can see that's like a tooth design around, not the actual ring gear, but this portion out here. That's what actually engages into that collar to then make this whole assembly spin together all at once. I do not think that this pin will be a weak point. That's a beefy pin. That's at least, I would say it's probably like a 2.5 millimeter pin. That's substantial. I don't think that you're going to break that pin very easily. If that's your weak point, I think that's going to be a pretty stout setup. All of these parts, they feel like metal. Pretty sure that's all metal. I don't think any of that is plastic. All right, I'm gonna have to rectify my problem of I need some shop rags. So give me 2 seconds. Okay. So let's try to put these all down. So let's now get I'm going to separate the ring gear from that center differential. I also need to count the teeth on this ring gear. These screws that hold the ring gear to the differential case, I think they're a 2.5 millimeter. Steering angle looks like real close to 45 degrees. I think it's advertised at 45 degrees. So here's inside the differential. This is the good, the important part to see. The teeth on these definitely seem pretty tiny. They're, it's an open differential. So when these are working with each other, they aren't necessarily taking the force like a locked style. So it is Summit style. That's but they're definitely a fine tooth on those side gears, and that gear's pretty small in general, maybe 10 millimeters or so. It is a 4-gear internal diff. All falls out in your hand pretty easily. And then that piece there, sorry, let's see if you can see that. That has the side gear on it. The pin for the locking differential goes through this piece as well. And the axle shaft engages on that side. Now, that part rides in this diff case, which I take it back. This case, I believe that's plastic, and that is where those diff gears have that diff collar engages on that plastic. That's definitely plastic. So there's your weak point. I'll also say that this piece rides in that, and when that differential is open, that spins like that. There is no bearing supporting those two parts. So that's a metal spinning on plastic situation. I could see that being an issue with with heat or wear, things like that, that could become, we could see something there. Now, even when we upgrade this to something, there's still no room for a bearing. You still have that collar. You know, that's just part of it. I wouldn't say that that's the worst. You know, it's just how it is. It's interesting. I don't know. I wouldn't say that that's a deal killer, but it's something to mention at the very least. So let's. I'm going to reassemble this slightly, at least, so that I don't forget how it goes together, because that is something that I would do. Or more likely lose a part. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and put this slightly back together for now. Another thing, when those pins all drop into that, they're then retained by these, see those like nubs that stick up on that gear? That's what holds the cross pins for everything in place. Creeper for the win. No, this is still better than a creeper by far. So I'm just gonna lightly tighten up some of these parts here. Coming. So there's the good stuff inside of that differential, at least. Now we know a little bit more about what's going on there. Let's see. Sorry again for missing comments everywhere. I can't keep up. If you put any kind of silicone in the diff while it's open now, oh, I don't care about that. I'm sure I'll be back in here before too long. I don't think that this thing is sealed. I don't think that you're going to be able to add a bunch of diff fluid to this and be able to hold it in there. I could be wrong on that as I'm looking at it, but there wasn't any seals or anything like that. You know, like a cardboard seal or an O-ring seal, especially like on the side gear or anything like that. So if you put a really heavy diff fluid in there, which I would imagine what most of you would probably do, I think that you would probably be okay. It would probably stay in there for a while. But I would not say that this is a sealed diff per se. Let's see. There we go. So, I forgot bearing. Now, this center bearing, that center, the center supports the diff, other side of the, you need these three bearings because this output shaft, like I said, it doesn't ride on a bearing inside that case or anything like that. So if you just supported it on these two outsides, you would end up with this flexing motion in the middle. You would tear up that plastic case before too long. But this little assembly has got a whole lot of interesting stuff going on, for sure. I do like it. Oh, let's, what do I need to count? I need to count the ring gear. Pause for counting. Let's see. Three. So I think it's a 33. I could have counted wrong. We'll see. Now we need to check the pinion gear. 1 second. $11. So, let's see how close I was. Yep. Okay. It seems like, well, it's hard to say if I counted right. But if I did count right, 11 tooth pinion, 33 tooth ring gear. That's a 3-to-1 reduction, which is different than what I counted initially. But a 2.5-to-1 reduction at the portals gives us a total axle reduction of 7.6-to-1, which is super deep for an axle. I mean, that's a lot of reduction. I'm just going to reassemble this diff case just so I don't lose any parts. Yes, I'll show you the pinion gear. I'll just pull it out just for the sake of being thorough. 1.5. So one thing I always liked so much was that I could buy Traxxas set pins so that I could use a 2mm driver for my drive shaft rather than a dinky 1.5mm, which used to be like the old Axials used 1.5. Now Axial's gone to 2mm, so a good 4. However, Traxxas went back to a little 1.5mm driver on the set pin. If you're going to copy a drive shaft design, why don't you copy the whole thing? They left out the good part of the drive shaft design. So, here's our pinion gear. It was really a bad day to wear a black shirt for you guys on Facebook. You know, one piece, through-hole design on the drive shaft, obviously. This, I mean, again, I'm pretty sure this is a sintered pinion. It's not a machined. But, you know, it's an okay-looking pinion. Decent design. I would say that's, you know, like the problem with, say, the Vetera drive gear is that it bolts on. So you end up with that hole through the middle with a lot of, you know, you end up with that weak point in that gear. You know, that's a downfall, and you're limited on gearing options. This one, I could see us having gearing options for this. The other thing, inside that axle housing, we've got a nice big bearing there, and you know, a pretty standard size bearing on the outside. So, you know, I like to see that. Nothing crazy, nothing terrible. Big bearings, nice diff size. Let's see if I can read this. Did I get it? I did. Assembly of that diff locking system, pretty easy. Any axle slot. In what respect? Side to side motion without the diff cover is good. Pinion to spur gear mesh is pretty good. Yes, 2 bearings supporting the pinion. Nothing crazy there. C-hubs part of the housing. They are not, but I'll show you how they go on. The C-hubs are a separate part, and you see these 3 screws on the outside. Those are what retain the C-hub to the axle. I'll pull one of them off, show you how that goes. Take apart the motor. Nice. Oh, these drivers are going to be all kinds of greasy. So that piece pulls right off. It's kind of got a keyed design where those three screws go. The axle housing has obviously a corresponding shape to that design. Slides on. There is no clocking ability. I think that's something to mention right away. You have no ability to adjust the caster of this axle housing. It is fixed exactly how it was designed. The diff cup is definitely not going to be anything like a. Let me actually fix. Oops. So, I'm just going to tighten these 3 screws up a little bit. It does have a little bit of caster built in. It just has no adjustability to either add more or I guess subtract any if you wanted, but you don't have the ability to add more. Do you think clockable C-hub is an option? I mean, anything's an option. Whether it would be an option that looked appropriate, being that you've got those 3 large bulb outs, where it's supposed to go, and then to add a clockable C-hub, you would have to have it in positions that worked for those 3 screws, so that you could turn it and do that again. It would be a little bit different. Where's my smart water? My smart water is right there. Yeah. So that cable is retained in the axle by this little E-clip on the back side, by the way, for those of you who haven't seen that. But yeah, no clocking options there. One thing to note right away for those of you who care. Okay, so I don't think there's much else to cover on the axle. I think at this point I want to tear the transmission out of this and take a look at that. Traxxas, I could almost bet you money you will not see a kit version. Traxxas doesn't make kits, just how it goes. I do not mind. I don't mind it ready to run. It is what it is. Okay, let's get into the transmission. Let's see how, the other thing that's going to be interesting is how much work it takes to get to this transmission, because it sits underneath of the battery tray and all of that. So we'll take a look at this thing in a couple ways. Let's first kind of look at it like as if we were, I'm not taking off my shirt. True, it is. I do have a good amount of chest hair. It'd be just as bad. Okay. So let's first take a look about. We're going to get into the transmission next. That's my goal. But let's just take a look and see what it would take to, say, replace a spur gear without any knowledge of how this thing goes together first. Hopefully we can still see. Let me make sure. Let me adjust cameras on both of them, or at least on YouTube. So there's 3 screws, one on the outside here, one on the outside here, and one in the center. From what I can tell, I need to remove those 3 screws to remove the gear cover for Ben. In a second here, I'm going to have to turn the air conditioner back on and make some noise, because watching a sweaty guy live on Facebook is something that none of your wives need to catch you doing. Oh, okay. So I removed those 3 screws, and the whole motor comes out. Motor, pinion, and motor plate, just so you know. And that is super interesting. How in the world? Huh. Let's see. Does it come off? You pry it off? It feels like it wants to come off, and it's gonna come off in a second if I don't figure it out. Ah, there you go. You have to pry it up and around the pinion. So the pinion nose actually sits in, there's this little pocket in here, this little center pocket. It's got kind of a lip, and you actually have to pry the pinion gear out from inside of there. Not taking off my shirt. Underneath of that now, we have got our motor and motor plate. Now, this motor plate design should be familiar to those of you guys who have a Losi Rock Ray, Losi Baja Ray now, with this set pinion option design. You move the, you just move the location to set proper gear mesh. Now, this is labeled A through H on here, and that will correspond to a certain gear ratio. Now, in the manual, I noticed that there's only 2 spur gear options for this, a 45 and a 39. Stock, I think this is a 45. Yes, this is a 45 tooth spur stock. So that's, I think this other motor mounts have had that similar design. So we're gonna pull these bullet plugs off. Maybe not. Yes. So we're gonna put the 21 turn aside. This is a 550 can motor, for those of you that were just talking to. So there's that aside. Now, if we needed to replace the spur gear at this point, it would not be possible. You still can't get to it. I think you got to pull the whole transmission to do it. I could be wrong, and well. Yeah, the upper link mount for the front 3 link right here, that is part of that transmission. I don't know. We're just gonna keep pulling screws out until we figure it out. So let's see. There's 2 screws here in the top of the battery box. Then it looks like there's 2 more in the sides towards the rear. Okay, let's see if that gets the battery box out. Appears so. Well, kind of. There. As we turn and move. Those screws back in. Damn it. Okay. Set the battery box aside. Let's see. Can't find the go private button. Jesus. All right. So underneath here, now we can see this transmission assembly. It's actually, for a 2-speed, that's pretty compact. Trail repair ain't happening. I'll give you that. Yes, I have a power drive. I've even got both of my power drivers right here. Are they charged? Yes, they're even charged. I'll use them even. So We've got this in here. The wiring on this thing is tightly placed directly over the top of the transmission. Yeah, there, and it's actually zip tied to the transmission. I mean, there's a little holder designed for it and everything to add it there. Nice touch, kind of a pain to actually, yeah. I mean, if you're going to talk about a trail repair, I guess they're just hoping that you don't have to repair this thing because it's kind of a pain in the ass. Because, Jesus, getting this transmission out is a pain in the ass. Let's pop off the ball cup of this micro servo for the 2-speed. This is absolutely the proper use for Lexan scissors, by the way. So we pop that off. Now let's remove the screws. Well, there's one screw in the bottom. That's probably not going to release the whole thing. But let's start there. It does have that. I would say that the transmission setup is definitely definitely has room for a nice low, or is a nice low center of gravity. I can't talk. Are the rod ends comparable to the Revos? Comparable, yes, but I think they're longer. So I removed the one center mounted screw from underneath. Gee, there's just freaking screws everywhere on this thing. You can see one here on the side from the top. Let's try and remove that, see what it does. Sure, I could look at the exploded diagram and try and study it and see. There's another one underneath of this XL5. I'm not. Trail repairing this thing would be a mother. I'm going to remove the XL5 screws. And I still haven't used the drill. Jesus. I'm not in the habit of it. Okay. All right, XL5's out of the way. Is it free? Kind of? Yeah, maybe? Yes? No? What am I working with here? How far off are we? Front? Okay. We need drive shafts out of the way, evidently. Come on. Oh my God. The rear drive shaft is, there we go. Now we got it, but we still have a servo attached, so we don't really have it. All right, mini servo's out. I'm going to reattach the linkage to the ball cup so I don't lose it. Okay, that. And set that whole thing aside again. And now we have our transmission out. So here's this thing. It's a compact little design, pretty cool. The XL5 is an updated one. It's safe for 3S LiPo. It has a drag brake function, some sort of cruise control, which I think is basically just like a trim hold. What is this? some sort of plastic shaving. Okay, so this is cool. I do like this. You know, the 2-speed selector is out here. So it moves it from, you know, first gear to second gear. Overall design is just nice and compact. Another thing to note is that the transfer case. So the rear output, go to the centered axle, is back here in the back, and then you have a front offset, and that's because this is it's a single output gear to the top of the transmission, and then it drives these other 2 gears. It's not a 3-gear transfer case in the sense that it's got 3 gears in series. It's 1 gear with 2 gears in parallel. For, you know, no, I will stick behind. I don't like 2 speeds. I still don't like 2 speeds. I don't like this because it's a 2-speed. But as far as 2 speeds go, I do like the size and compact design of this. But I will stand behind. I'm not a fan of 2 speeds. So we're going to remove the transfer case tail housing first. At least I think we are. Yes. All right. So that cover comes right off. 3 screws, 3 5x11x4 bearings, it looks like, or we're pretty close. And then inside we do have those 3 gears with almost no grease. Yay for no grease. Is there slop? Let's see. Yes, there's definitely slop. So if I'm holding the output solid back here, okay? So if I hold it solid, don't let it rotate at all, I can get that much movement basically out of it before I feel it turning the outputs. Yeah, I have right at that much, which is, what do I got? God damn, the pin keeps coming disengaged over here. Let's see. I don't know. That's 20 degrees of lash in there, something like that. We'll see. So let's take this. We're going to take one of the bottom transfer gears out first, and we'll give that a count so I can update the calculator. We're going to start on I can't. $28. Ow. Shit. Busted me. 20. I think it's a 28 tooth. Yes. And I think the input tooth. I think the input gear is the same. Yeah. The transfer case gears, these 3 gears are all the same tooth count. So there is no there's no change in gearing really based on these 3 gears at the back side of this thing. You got 3 28 tooth gears. 28 or 30, whatever they are, they're the same. It doesn't really matter what the tooth count is now because they're all 3 the same. So we're gonna take these out, and there's like no grease on these at all. Not like a light dusting or anything. There's no grease in this transfer case. So now I do still have that front drive shaft assembled. Can I get it off? Damn it. I had to take the front drive shaft off. So, sorry. Okay. Oh, there was a shim on this bottom transfer case gear for the rear output. So that's interesting. They shimmed one of them, or needed shimming. The output gear, the pin driving that output gear is a pretty decent size. Not too small. That's the front output shaft for the front of the transfer case. That goes to the front. And there's a shim on that one as well. So that helps get that shaft further out to the front so that, so that you don't run into clearances with that front drive shaft. All right. So now that we've got that back cover off, we've got 3 screws around the outside of this to hold the inner case halves together on this. Yeah, so the whole argument on 2 speeds and that, a lot of people like them for the gimmicky part. That's fine. Oh wait, we'll go back. 5mm shafts, yes. 48 pitch gears, also I believe so, yes. So I get all of them. Oh, there's 2 gears on or 2 screws on the back side that also hold the case together. I will also say, looking at it now, just as I'm disassembling this here, taking all these screws apart, notice how small the slipper disc is on this thing. I'm not sure what that slipper disc material is on the backside, and it is on both sides of this thing, so it is a dual slipper, but that's a really small diameter slipper design. All right. Now we get into the 2-speed part. And we see a whole lot of plastic gears going on. Okay. So first of all, we've got our shift fork that fell out there. That is a plastic shift fork on the metal output there. So I'm just going to put that back in place there. So let's see. Interesting. Kind of a cool design for this this 2-speed. Now yes, I am allergic to a power driver. You're all very welcome. Can't help but forget it. So we're going to take this slipper assembly off with all of those. And it's an interesting slipper material, but man, these little discs are small. And then you've got 3 black washers, 1 silver, 4 black washers, 1 silver. They look like almost like a crush washer. I don't know. We're going to be referring to the exploded view on that for reassembly. Okay, back to it. So this is the shaft that attaches, that the spur gear is attached to. Your first gear here, your first drive gear, one of these 2. This will be activated when you're in 2nd gear. This is what this is always driving the gear next to it, but it's actually will be the path that the power will take when you're activated into 2nd gear. This is the gear that will be working when you're in 1st gear. Both of these gears are plastic and 48 pitch. I I could see either of these two being your weak point. You know, depending on your situation, depending on how much heat. Again, there's no grease on these. They are plastic gears, so you know they'll run a little bit easier, but there's no grease in this transmission at all. Just to note. And then inside here, this is the gear, this is the only metal gear inside the internal portion of the transmission. It's a sintered gear, and that has got the collar that will accept the slider for the for when you select high gear. That is bearing supported with a slightly smaller bearing, like that's probably a 5x10. I don't think it's a 5x11. And then so it will ride on that shaft, and it will be engaged or disengaged with this collar here, which, let's see if there we go. So once it's engaged there, it slides over the that metal collar. Sorry, trying to keep it in both view. And that is what will give you either your single speed or your two speed. Single speed, or first gear, should talk proper, get right terms. First gear, this slider will engage the larger plastic gear. So if you're in first gear, you've got a plastic spur gear to the plastic drive gear to this plastic gear, and then into the 3 transmission gears. So that is, if you're in high gear, you have plastic spur gear, plastic input gear, and then to this metal gear. That will be the load path then, and then it will go to the 3 metal transmission or transfer case gears. So information there for you. Let's see. I don't know that there's much else to cover inside of this transmission at that point. I am surprised. I couldn't tell 100%, but I did think that there was a little bit more metal inside this internal transmission than. You know what I didn't do is I didn't count teeth on any of this stuff. I should do that to calculate the final ratio. Let's see. So it's an 18 tooth. So input gear 1 for first gear is 18, and the second gear is a 36. And then if you're in high gear, second gear, you'll have a 30 gear on your input gear, and the second gear is a 24. So that gives us, let's see, pinion gear is 11 and the spur is a 45. What did I mess up there? Oh, oops, first gear. I need to fix that. Sorry. That. Anyway, I'll figure that out. But I think that my my gearing did calculate out somewhere around where I thought. which is 30 to 1 in high gear and 60 to 1 in low gear. So, oh, got to put the shift fork back in first. Let's see. Ben, sorry, I didn't catch your full question there. So that shift fork is plastic, and it runs on a plastic collar as well. Just a lot of plastic on plastic, you know, running there. Let's see. I figured. Yeah, I would say that when you get one of these kits, I would suggest opening it up and greasing it. I think that would just be that will probably help reduce the noise, and probably just be a good practice overall. And so it's an interesting part of that anyway. So I think that's the fun parts of this truck anyway. It'd be interesting to see how everything works as time goes and we get a lot of drive time on them. Yes, I'm finally using the drill driver. You're all welcome. I'm not putting it all back together. I'm just kind of assembling it. I'm going to be back into this thing anyway. So I'm just getting things kind of put back where they go so that I can go from there. So let's, while we're here, I'm putting things back together. I can try and, I think I'm pretty sure Woody had a lot to do with the design of this. It's all, there's a lot of really good design in this. I think Woody has done some really cool cars in the past. I imagine this one was his. It's a cool truck. And for those of you who don't know, Woody was he's been in crawling for a long time. This car was definitely designed by people who did know what they were doing. So it's not one of those ones that was put out by guys who just did research. It's guys who were involved, or at least a guy who oversaw it. Yeah, I'm also in second gear, but I really like this little driver. Can't find these anymore. Let's see. I'll try and answer questions while I'm kind of halfway reassembling this thing, if there is any that pop back up. Otherwise, we're just about going to be done with this. So I do like that this one has the adjustable clutch. I don't like the size of the 12-volt Makitas and DeWalt's and things like that. I just don't find it handy for what I'm doing. I don't need the power. So that's why I don't like the DeWalt's and the Makitas of that size. Let's see. As far as getting, you know, when I get one of these, obviously, you prefer more training. I would prefer this tranny to be a little bit more lubed. These hex drivers are old axial handles, for the most part. There is a lot of lash in there, but I think that's just 2-speed. So, you know, I think that's kind of just going to be how it's going to be with that. This does have the clutch. That's why I do like this. The new Ryobi Vortex don't have the clutch. Could we get a look at the body? We did cover that, but we can cover at this point. We're just any questions you have. So again, the body's large. A couple of nice things to talk about on this thing is that you see there's these two spikes in the back of the body. Those drop down into some corresponding holes on the bumper to help lock in this whole back assembly. Everything on this is not super rigid because it's, it's got the wheel wells and then they're all tied together with cross braces. You see there's these two pockets in each of the wheel wells. I think those are for rock lights. You pull those out, you can drop it in. Yeah, this body, like I was saying, this is 1.9 pounds as it sits. So if you do feel like this thing is top heavy, it's because this thing is almost 2 pounds of body. You put you drop the wheelbase to 12.3, or you throw some sort of truggy cab on this thing, and you get rid of a ton of weight. Drop that, you get rid of that up high weight especially, and I imagine this thing will do really well at that point. So we've got the weird gear cover set up with the. Now I'll show you guys what the skid plate without that looks like. Do you think the gearing can be changed, the offset outputs to the OD? Man, if you're going to try and change the gearing on the back of this thing, you're not going to be able to do it with this transmission case. You'd have to have a whole different case to relocate the front output, or you'd have to try and find multiple sizes of gears that fit in there without. I highly doubt that you'd be able to just throw in gears. Axial SCX10 bumpers do look like I think they bolt right up with the two screws, so they definitely borrowed that dimension and off of the. But here's what that skid plate area looks like without that transmission sitting in it. It sits all the way down, nice and low. There's hardly anything extra down there. This portion up here actually houses the spur gear, so it's interesting. I didn't really compare it to the MST, the Vitara, or the Axial, other than just some features that look like basically the exact same as one of those. Until we really drive it, I can't really say. The same, I believe that the frame is the same width at the bumper mounts. I think that they deliberately mimicked those points so that there was available bumper options from some of those popular aftermarket options there. So let's see. The spare tire mount is not a swing away. It's fixed to the back of the body. Would you go with Proline shocks? No, I don't know that the shocks that are on this thing already. I would not immediately look at switching these things out. I think these shocks, other than feeling like a heavy spring and too stiff of oil, maybe. I think that these shocks are probably. I think these things feel better than a Proline scalar shock. So they're dual X-ring design at the bottom. So it's a solid shock that comes in it. Is the body kind of like a hard body? No, it's an all Lexan body for sure, but it's got so much crap bolted to it. The exo roof cage mount, fender flares, and the sides of the body in this area, they fall down into these channels on the sides of the sliders right in here. So they're supported on the back side and the front side. They can't go in or out. So it's just locked in place there. So that whole body just becomes super rigid, even with being a Lexan body. It's a cool fact. It's definitely worth mentioning. And at this point, I'm not going to reassemble all the rest of this stuff. It's going to kind of sit here and wait. As far as one of those things, yes, buy it, no, don't buy it. I would say that this is a buy it truck. second camera going there. It does feel durable. You know, there is points in it that do feel like they're going to be weak points. You know, but at the same time, I think that it's going to be a good truck. I really do. I think that it's going to be. Now, here's the other thing. You know, we all know that axial is the most popular, and most of us love our axials. You know, they were what we've had to work with, and to this point, they were a lot of fun to work with, and I really enjoy my axial cars. Would axial be as popular as it is if it weren't for, you know, the aftermarket options that were developed because of, you know, honestly weak points? You know, would they become that popular? You know, I think that the amount of things you can build with an axial has made axial more popular. Even though a lot of us, by the time we're done, there's no axial left. I've got my new bomber style truck. This is my new UC Fab truck, and it's a axial bomber based idea. There's a bomber skid plate. Other than that, it's all VP axles. I'm going to use an SCX10 style transmission in it. You know, the body, nothing else here is off of that, but it's still a bomber-based car. You know, it was built because I love my bomber so much, and I'm, you know, in the end, I'm just using a bomber skid plate. These panels I designed, and these are 3D printed panel. You know, I built them for this car. This car, I built this though because I love my axials. So will this car have that, or will it bring a completely different crowd? That's an interesting thing. Let's see. Any other questions? Sorry. Overall closing thoughts. You know, the portal axles. Do people like portal axles? Do you understand that they are scale but may not necessarily be scale on a D110 body? I don't know. I don't know. I don't know how much people care about that all at the same time. Does it raise the bar for radar and crawler? Yeah, it does. I think it does. I think it raises it, but you know, it raises it ready to run. Now, will it hang with a fully built one? Things like that. Maybe out of the box. I have no idea. Yeah. I just think it has. You know, it's got a lot of other things other than just when it comes out and how it is. It has a lot of other things that need to work in its favor. Positives outweigh the negatives. I mean, I would own one. I think that, you know, I would spend my own money to own one, I should say. I think it's worth it. I would definitely own one. You know, I would own an SCX10 2. I love it. Original SCX10. I still love some of them. It's a hard thing, you know. So portals, no portals for me. Okay, that some people are going to feel like that. The other thing is that, like I said, this axle has a 3-to-1 ring and pinion. An axial SCX10 2 is 3.75 to 1. An axial SCX10, the original, with an overdrive gear set is like 2.73 to 1. I think the stock gear set in an axial is like 3.2. So you could actually take off this portal and run a standard knuckle style design, and you could run this. Granted, let's see, you could run it with, you would need to adjust your spur and pinion probably at the transmission to get enough reduction. And running a 2-speed would not be a good idea. I think that is, you would need to stay in low gear, or you would need to put an axial transmission in this thing, or put these axles underneath an axial underneath an axial chassis. tons of options. There's options all over the place. I'd venture to guess that these mounting points are probably pretty similar in width to an SCX10 too. Do I have? Let's check. Let's see. Okay. The link mounting points are as close to identical as it matters, as far as the width of the lowers. The upper is basically in the exact same position as well. I mean, they looked at an SCX10 too. I mean, they had one in the office, I'd say. Yes, there is lights. I do have lighting. Here's my makeshift studio lighting. Well, it's an actual studio light, but here's my entire filming setup. MacBook on a crate. Phone gets held in this little roller skate thing. Body, pile of radio. It's all over the place. So, you know, this car is cool. I like it. I wouldn't say that I know it well enough at this point for it to want to make it my only crawler. I guess if that makes any sense. I would, in the future, would I possibly suggest to somebody that way? Who knows? It's a possibility. Let's see, what else we got? Let's see, I'm gonna see. So there's options all over for this thing. I dig it. Light bulbs for future. Oh, I see what you mean. I was like, what the hell are you talking about? I thought you meant reflection in this from light. I don't know. So that is what we've got going on. I hope that is how top heavy is it or something. Honestly, that it's the body that makes it feel. A lot of people have been saying that it feels top heavy when it's crawling. I think that comes down a lot to having a 2-pound body sitting on top of the car. I don't think that there's a lot of things you can do to get around the feeling of driving a truck with a 2-pound body. A lot of people, I do have the full weight of this car, but it's in my phone on the saved pictures, and I can't get to it while I'm streaming here, so I apologize for that. Yeah, put this let's see. Yeah, if you change out the body, then you change this truck a lot, I think. That's going to be the biggest thing. Yes, light buckets are in the body. They're all over it. There's headlights, turn signals, brake lights, marker lights. And they're all clear, translucent, super nice, ready for an LED string. What's the usual full weight of an average body? So like an average body with no scale details, I think you're going to be, a half a pound. So, less than, much, much less. But you start getting something like you start looking at a honcho, that's going to be significantly heavier. So, lots of things to consider. All in all, I would say that there's good things here. If tomorrow I was going on a trail ride that was 2 hours away from the house, and I only had to take one rig, personally I'd still take my SCX10 too, just so I made sure I got a full day. But that's, who only gets to take one rig crawling? Actually, if I only got to take one rig, it'd probably be my bomber. The bomber's just the most fun. Speaking, my new bomber is all dressed up and ready for Axial Fest. New Pro Spec shocks, panels, all fresh. No rear tire anymore. So, yeah. I think that's all we got, guys. I think that was enough for tonight. Okay, we got one more question here. How is the geometry with the CMS? That is one thing that I didn't touch on, is the geometry of the CMS. With that servo center mounted in the front and sideways like that, it really does give you a short drag link and panhard. The panhard on the axle is quite a ways in towards the center on the front. It's not maximized. It's not built into that outer C-hub because those C-hubs work on both sides. It doesn't have much bump steer. It's got almost no bump steer. You know, you can feel that it goes down and it feels good. It doesn't move around a bunch. But with that short, you do see a little bit of a side-to-side swing in that arc. However, like we had mentioned, those front shocks don't have a ton of travel, so you don't see a ton of that swing. You start finding people putting super long shocks on this truck, they're gonna have issues with those shocks swinging and hitting the chassis. Do the disc lock independently? Yes. There's front lock only, rear lock only, front and rear lock, and then front and rear unlocked. Squeeze the shocks, guys. Let's see. So yeah, that's what we got. Good stuff, guys. I'm excited to do more with it. I've got probably start tearing some things down, start looking at some other things, or start taking measurements, whatever. So we'll see how it goes. That's it. All right, guys. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time, and I'll be putting actual edited videos together of looking at some of these things closely. So for those of you guys who don't want to tell somebody to go watch an hour-long video, I'll put some things together that just show those details. So that's it, guys. Thanks, and we'll see you next time.